Hello, my name is Janzen Molina, and this is a presentation on problems surrounding auto layout and default frame sizing in Figma, a vector graphics editing tool. One way that many designers use vector graphics editors such as Figma is to create prototypes of websites using frames that make up larger components. While prototyping on Figma, I use auto layout while creating frames to separate different components because it makes it easier to drag and drop certain elements in existing regions of my design without having to spend time precisely adjusting the location of each element. However, for my workflow, I also have to keep outer frame sizes the same and consistent in order to match a standard screen size that facilitates the process of exhibiting my designs to other members of my team. When trying to add an auto layout to an existing frame, Figma automatically adjusts the resizing mode to hug, meaning that the size of the frame will adapt based on the internal contents. This is useful in some contexts, but not useful for my particular workflow, because when I insert a nav bar, a smaller component, into the larger frame here, the automatic resizing changes the size of the larger frame for my specified screen size, and I don't have the standard frame size memorized, so I have to spend time looking up the information and manually adjusting the frame size to the original size. Additionally, the frame size shown at the bottom is set to hug by hug, which is not useful information to those viewing the design file because of how ambiguous the term hug is in comparison to simply having the sizing numbers displayed instead. This is especially true for non-designers, who have no initial context as to what hug means in this scenario. This is further confirmed by dozens of designers and developers alike on the Figma forum, concurring that the hug by hug display is generally useless information, and as of the time of recording, no direct solution has been implemented. Alternative options like checking the right sidebar and checking the inspect page exist, but require more cognitive load on the user to precisely view or click on the UI to get that information. The crux of this issue can be explained by three causes, the first of which is the congruence principle. Knowing that there should be some sort of visual communication on the software end to demonstrate that the user is utilizing hug sizing, the format in which the content is presented stays the same. In essence, there's only one visual difference between changing between hug mode and the standard fixed sizing mode, which does not give the user any context behind what being in hug mode does without the user having to figure it out themselves. Additionally, the only given visual change in the hug by hug text is incomprehensible to most users and does not properly communicate the output based on their input of creating an auto layout. The next cause is a lack of shortcuts in order to adjust the sizing mode away from the hug mode and back to fixed mode. In fact, the hug mode prevents the manual resizing of the given frame from the right sidebar, which is the only place to resize the element besides manually grabbing the sizing handles that requires more precise movement. The main options are to undo or click on both the vertical and horizontal sizing modes in order to change the back to fixed mode, both of which increase the amount of time and steps it takes to complete the process. Lastly, the foreground task of adding the auto layout is intended among users, but background tasks like unconsciously keeping the design clean and preventing unexpected changes to the frame are consistently within the mind, even if we tend not to think about it intently. Creating this sudden unexpected change from fixed to hug mode creates unnecessary cognitive load on the user in a way that causes the context of the task at hand to be forgotten and replaced with foreground tasks intent on changing the issues caused by the sudden change. So how do we solve this problem? One solution that I found revolves around changing the border around a selected element to have a wavy pattern at the edges of the element that the frame is hugging in order to signify the boundaries of the hug sizing mode. This would solve the issue of visual communication because at that point, the user would be able to create a mental map of how the hug sizing works when implemented on an actual frame rather than having to rely on the definition of what hug sizing is. A second solution involves allowing the user to both view and alter the pixel size of the selected frame directly from the bar that pops up below whenever the frame is clicked on by the user. This would give the user immediate access to reverting the changes made by the automatic hug sizing, which reduces the steps, visual movement time, and physical precision it would take for these changes to take effect. It would also keep the user focused on the foreground task at hand without creating frustration or confusion, as the information would be immediately available to them in a way that does not create excessive cognitive load.